Hello, everybody, and welcome back once again to the Hoosier State Sports Show. My name is Joey. As always, I'm joined by Adam. Adam, how have you been?
I'm doing well, but I'm not gonna lie. This is a whole lot different hearing us actually on video now. It's good to be back, that's for sure.
Yeah. So address the elephant in the let's address the elephant in the room. It's been almost 2 years. We did good for like 7 or 8 months. Every week we had an episode. I bought a house. Adam had a new baby. Of course, this was 2 years ago, so she's not as much of a baby now, but
No,
just a little bit of an explanation of where we went. We got busy. Podcast got put on the back burner, but here we are. We've been talking about it for a few weeks, how we're ready to get going again. So we're excited.
oh yeah, for sure, agree with that. So you want to kind of explain how we want to do things differently with this podcast this time, or you want me to go ahead?
Yeah. So first of all, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, you can already see that we are now have a video version. For right now, we're just going to be recording and posting. The audio version will still be available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all that, but we wanted to try something new, and hopefully in the near future, we're going to be streaming these live on at least Facebook, hopefully YouTube in the future also, but we'll see. So big changes. Also, I wanted to make one more note. We're not going to hold ourselves to a strict schedule like we did the last time around. We're still going to get you hopefully at least a weekly episode. We're not going to guarantee what day it's going to be on. And we've also had some discussions about maybe some future live streams just to, pre-games, post-games, whatever. But this is not going to be as professional as last time right away. First, we're just going to get back in the swing of things and see how it goes. Would you agree with that, Adam?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the one thing that I would add is obviously we're going to also be looking to maybe try some different types of ideas for segments, maybe some activities that we throw out there. Like, I don't know, I'll use pardon the interruption as an example. They do like speed rounds where they give themselves a certain amount of time to answer questions, or we might, go away from more data driven analytical concepts into maybe more opinion, get ourselves, not being forced to necessarily talk about things. So, just as an example, if there's nothing really to talk about, with certain topics, we're not going to force something in there. Just some reflecting that we certainly did. And we hope that it provides a more interactive, interesting experience. That all being said, too, we also would like to get people on here with us and be able to chat sports up with us as well. Anything else you want to add before we move forward?
No, other than now that we're going to be on Facebook and YouTube, I think it's going to be a lot easier for the listeners or now viewers to interact and comment and maybe leave us some questions and give us some future ideas for future episodes. But I'm excited for this new beginning. I know, Adam, you are too, but I think we should jump right in. What do you think, Adam? Let me pull up my list here.
Yep, sounds good to me.
All right. Now, it only seemed fitting, that we start this off talking about Jim Irsay. As you all know by now, just a few days ago, he passed away at the age of 65. Just to start, and this is what everybody will say about him, but I'm going to say it too. He had his demons. We all know that, and everybody does. And there's one quote that I heard the other day, and it was about parents. And I know Jim Irsay isn't my parent, but I'm going to say it and apply it to him. And the quote went something like, "Sometimes I look at my parents, and it's easy to forget that it's their first time living too." And if you break that down, that's a pretty powerful quote. And like I said, no, Jim Irsay's not my parent, but yes, he was a multi-billionaire who owned a NFL franchise, but that doesn't mean it wasn't his first time living too. So yes, he made mistakes. He had his demons that he fought. And like I said, we all do. But if you ask anybody around Indiana, and you could see all the players over the past few days and their pouring of support of Jim Irsay and the family, just how well loved this guy was, not only to our state, but every single player that's ever played for him.
Yeah, I would say, kind of to echo what you've been talking about with players sharing, I've been reading just a lot of stories that, obviously sports media have been sharing, the players, similarly too. And I think that what sticks out to me is the I can't say it. Philanthropy that he had, with giving back to the
Yeah.
communities. Certainly, Indiana, like, I don't know, Peyton Manning really said it best. Indianapolis went from being a racing town and a basketball town to being big into football. And you think about that now, like we were talking about this just the other day with how, football's taken off in Indiana. You've had the Colts fans now, flag football's coming in. And I think you have, I believe it's over 60 high school teams, that are, trying to get kids involved in that. You think about that. Like, I don't think football's interactions with people in general would have happened without him, doing everything that he's done. But on a different segue too, you kind of mentioned, your quote. My mom and I were actually talking about him just yesterday, and I think one of the things that sticks out. You mentioned his demons earlier, but it's very surprising. You think about how young he is as well. 65 is not old in the grand scheme of things. But she mentioned, he's lived a full life, in less time than other people. And, you sit there and you grasp that, you think about everything he's been able to do, for the state. And it's like, you see it with the players, you see it with really everybody. Like, I don't know about you, but I think the thing that most surprises me is that outgoing support for him because I mean, you and I both know it. People have bad mouthed him for years, talking about his demons and how, oh, what a shock, he does something like this again. But you know this about me, Joey. His initiative of kicking the stigma for me is one of the most significant accomplishments that he's had in his life. And I don't know, for people that don't know exactly what that is, it's a mental health initiative about just being able to talk through everything that you might be dealing with. I think at one point or another, everybody can certainly say they've had an event that's thrown them for a curve or they've gone through some sort of episodes. You know me, I lost my twin brother 6 years ago. My grandma, who I was very close to, just recently passed away. But those aren't stories that just connect to me; they can connect to anybody. And seeing someone like Jim Irsay come through and give that encouragement for people to step up, it for me is what I will remember the most about him.
Yeah, and we've shared some of these conversations before, and I'm so glad you brought that up because it is important. But I do want to share one more story, one more Jim Irsay story. You may have seen it on Twitter, you may not have, but this was posted by Jake Query from ESPN Radio. And we talk about the building wings on hospitals and the kicking the stigma and whatever that thing was with the orca whale a couple years ago, stuff that's seen in the public eye with Jim Irsay. But there are some things behind the scenes. Who knows how many or how much money he's donated to. But I want to share this one story. Like I said, this was somebody got a hold of Jake Query. He was a listener of theirs on ESPN Radio. And it says, I have a Jim Irsay story near and dear to me I'd like to share. My son suffered a severe TBI at the age of 11 in 2014 while playing in a travel football tournament. He was in a coma in ICU at Riley Hospital for 14 days and then in inpatient Riley rehab for 2.5 months. Jim Irsay sent his assistant to the hospital to give us a check for $20,000 to help us get through some of the money things that came up. We didn't ask for it. We had no idea it was happening, and there were no camera crews or newspaper articles. She just said that he had read about it and it broke his heart and he wanted to help. It did help a lot, and I am forever grateful to him. Calvin can't walk, nor is he able to carry on conversations or give anything more than a few words in response to things we say to him. But he teared up when I told him Jim Irsay had passed away. Lots of negative floated about that man, but I am someone that was touched by his kindness. I read that the day that he passed away, Adam, and it was already, hitting me hard. And I read that, and I think that one story really solidifies just what kind of human being Jim Irsay was.
To echo on that, I think with a lot of the stories that I've been reading, it's very similar. I'm actually Larry Brown Sports, talked about everything with his quiet philanthropy emerging, and there's tons of stories where Jim Irsay was like, "I'm willing to help you. My one condition is you don't put it out in the media. I'm willing to help you guys do anything." He didn't want credit for helping the people. Again, some other things that kind of stuck out, he would give a birthday card with money to every single employee every year. There's the stories of giving out money to all the fans in Jacksonville to say, "Hey, thanks for supporting our team," helping the homeless in the community with things that they needed from time to time. And he never wanted credit for that. One thing that was cool that I was reading about him was seeing, he would sign the bills and, that he would give out to people. And some people kept those as, mementos. And it's like, it's awesome to think about, that being something that someone wants to keep rather than, go out and spend it. Because it's like, you think about what he was willing to give. And I don't want to make it, I mean, it shouldn't be just about money because, he was very generous with it. But I think it's the idea of a person that would give everything that they can in being able to help someone without being asked. You often hear about celebrities that are rude and, they kind of want to hoard things. But I mean, Ursay was willing to do things that not everybody is willing to and never asked for anything in return for it. He just had that kind of servant heart to help people. And, I sit back and think about it now, and we've all seen people negatively talk about him, like I said, but for what he was willing to do for people, not with anything in return, I think is just one of the most admirable things in a person that you can see. So on my end, I'd like to say certainly may his family, transition through this in the best way possible. And my prayers are with all of them certainly because I don't know about you, it's hit me hard, and I'm sure it's hitting a lot of people really hard, especially with how young he is and knowing the impact that he leaves behind.
Yeah, absolutely. I echo everything you just said. And just to kind of transition here, he's always wanted what's best for the city, whether that be through his bringing the team to Indy. I know that was his father, but he's the one that's kept it here for 40 years nearly, or all the philanthropy, I can't say it either, Adam, that he's done throughout the years in the community. But even up to his last tweet, which will kind of help us transition here. His last tweet was before game one, I believe. That ended with the miracle from Tyrese Halliburton hitting the two to tie it, where they won in overtime. But Jim Irsay's last tweet was "Let's go Pacers," and I'm going to paraphrase here on the last half. The last half was something like "for our city" or "for our community" or something. And I think that really, in a nutshell, explains who Jim Irsay was. But transitioning to the Pacers, Adam. Last night, obviously Sunday night, I'm sure you stayed up late watching that game just like I did.
Yep.
The Pacers had a chance to go up 3-0 in the series, commanding 3-0, and it looked like they were well on their way, Adam. They jumped up to a 20-point lead in the first half, and it seemed like towards the end of the second quarter is kind of when it seemed to tail off a little bit. Ultimately, the Pacers did end up losing, setting up a very important game 4. But I'd like to get some of your takeaways from game 3, Adam.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, kind of one of the things that in this series continues to stick out is how close these games have been. Up until, I mean, last night was a 6-point loss. You had one possession being the outcome of this. And this game, just like the others, kind of came down to that. So that kind of sticks out that this is one of the first times they haven't got it done. Obviously, I connect also with game 3 we lost in the last series we played against Cleveland. We've lost it in this series. So that, I don't know, that just kind of sticks out to me in the back of my brain. But there's two big things that for me have an impact, and I'm certain you'll probably echo these. Number one was when Aaron Naismith went down with his ankle injury, that to me was one of the defining moments that turned this game negatively. You saw the injury. It looked like he rolled his ankle pretty hard. Obviously, he was limping and in quite a bit of pain. He did come back. I've read reports, obviously, today that, after the game, he had a noticeable limp. So, obviously, game 4 comes into question for him. We'll discuss that a little bit more later. But the other big factor is the foul trouble they got themselves into. I'm gonna criticize Benedict Mathurin just for a second here, because he had two, I can't even think of what's it called real quick. Like, you get in front of someone, you set a pick. There we go.
Illegal screen.
Yeah, screen. Yeah. Thank you. So he had 2 plays where he kind of blundered setting those picks, and they caused quick fouls. And then, you had, it was in a time span of just 2 or 3 minutes. You had 6 fouls on the team. And I remember they were talking about, it's like, oh, the Pacers at the end of the third quarter, fortunately, they still have a foul to give. And it was 2 seconds later, they got themselves out of that. And the Knicks started being able to shoot free throws. They made, I think it was 24 free throws last night. They only missed 2 or 3 for the whole game. So you think about those fouls and the impact they caused. This was a very winnable game, but it was very simple mistakes with fouls. And then obviously Naismith's injury, in my opinion, hurts him more. What are your kind of takeaways on the game for yourself?
Well, you bring up foul trouble, and the Knicks got into quite a bit of foul trouble on their own. Jalen Brunson had 4 fouls in the first half. I think Karl Anthony Towns was at 3 and picked up that 4th early in the second half. And you and I were texting at halftime, and we both said the same thing. They need to be attacking Brunson every single possession. And you even said something about posting up Miles Turner and Pascal Siakam down inside the paint to try to pick up that 5th or 6th foul on Karl Anthony Towns. So I think that was one of the more pivotal things to me. I didn't understand the lack of aggression on offense, knowing that the 2 superstars for the Knicks both were in foul trouble.
I wouldn't call it a lack of offense. I'd call it, a lack of trying to be aggressive. It was a lack of being able to attack at all. They were shooting terribly in the second half, especially that third quarter, because they brought up a good point. We were at 58 points at halftime, and we had that really big second quarter, and I think the Knicks, they doubled our output in the second half on scoring. They came back from, I think they were down 13 at the half. Obviously, in the third, that means they came back to get that even, and then they took the lead, and we just couldn't get it back after that because, they couldn't attack. And a lot of turnovers, too, ended up leading to quick points by the Knicks as well. And you think about it, Karl Anthony Towns had 4 points in the second quarter up till halftime. He scored, I don't know if it was the third or the fourth quarter. Don't quote me. And if you remember, he had 20 points in one quarter by itself. And I want to say it was the fourth.
Yeah, that was the fourth quarter. Yep.
So
because Brunson actually did pick up that 5th foul and ended up on the bench for a good portion of the fourth quarter. And it was really Karl Anthony Towns that led that fourth quarter surge for the Knicks.
And, you sit there and you think about that. It's that team has the ability to go and be able to shoot at will. They have perennial all-stars pretty much along other than Josh Hart, no offense to him, but the other 4 are all-star caliber players. Any of them at any given point could come and score. And obviously last night was Karl Anthony Towns' moment to shine. And, I remember I was telling you, like I said at halftime, they need to go and start guarding Brunson more. And my problem is I think they started guarding him too much, focusing more on him, and they just kind of let the whole thing with Karl Anthony Towns go, where it's you weren't posting up on him the way that you should have, and they started gaining momentum, and I think it ended up really hurting the team for sure.
Absolutely. Well, obviously, like we said, Pacers lost, but that sets up an extremely important game four. The difference between going back to New York, being up 3-1, and going back to New York and the series being tied cannot be understated. With that being said, Adam, what are some of the keys that the Pacers need to get that 3-1 lead in game four? And what are some of the things to look out for?
I think it goes back to what we discussed last night. You have to have more of a presence in the post because, again, if you don't get Turner and Siakam down low able to score, and you're just depending on perimeter shooting like they kept doing, like up until the end of the first quarter, they were 1 for 7 on 3-pointers last night. If you're relying on that as your basis to take a lead, you're not going to be able to. But I think they need to do a better job of preventing silly turnovers and just staying out of foul trouble. And for me, that the first thing you do, I wouldn't play Benedict Mathurin in game 4 at all. I haven't really seen him do anything in this series in particular that like stands out of like, oh, he deserves to play more. I would recommend you use Tony Bradley. You get more of a center presence in there. You get Turner and Siakam more rest because when the Knicks put Mitchell Robinson in there for more time, it made a difference. I don't care what anyone says. He may not have scored 20 points or anything, but it was old school basketball. He was able to get those rebounds right by it. He got a few quick shots. Obviously, Josh Hart kept getting rebounds. You need to do what you can to get that lead or that rebound differential in your favor, which means I think you need to play a little more post heavy. But I think the other thing is just don't force shooting you don't have to. In this case, I think there was a lot of threes they were trying to force. I think they started to feel the pressure. So, Halliburton in particular started shooting some pretty deep and ridiculous shots he had no business doing. So, those are things that for me kind of stick out. But the other factor, and I don't know if anyone's going to agree with me on this, it's like make sure you get Halliburton's dad on the camera as much as you can with him going back, being able to watch game 4. You let those Knicks fans see it. You let those players see it. You let them get distracted by, oh, great, he's back. He's going to talk his game. And, I think anything you can do with the crowd also becomes a huge factor as well.
Oh yeah, you've got to get the crowd into it early, no matter what you do. You kind of saw that in Game 3 yesterday. They got the crowd into it, and when they jumped up to that 20-point lead, and then it just seemed to me like it was a mentality shift at that point. It seemed like the Pacers kind of took their foot off the gas, and the Knicks started playing out of desperation, which led to that collapse. But before we move on from the Pacers entirely, I did want to give one more shout out to Tony Bradley. Now, he didn't light up the stats at all yesterday, finished with like 2 points and 3 rebounds or something. But it seemed like when he was in the game, the number of second chance points and the number of offensive rebounds going the Knicks' way went down dramatically. And that is something out of everything that I think that the Pacers really need to look at going into game 4 is how to prevent the offensive rebounds, because those second chance points are killers.
Yeah, I would like to, and I don't know, this is just me. I'd like to see them go with maybe a more post-heavy lineup. Like the Knicks have very good rebounding capability all across the board. They were talking about Josh Hart being the number 1 perimeter rebounder in the whole NBA, and he's just a guard.
Yep.
Obviously, OG Anunoby, IU proud. He can do a little bit of everything. He had some really good rebounding and defensive possessions. I think the Knicks will kind of try to do more of what they were doing with the Robinson and Karl Anthony Towns lineup. So, you start using all of those as factors. I would like to see them actually maybe put Turner over at power forward. You move Siakam to small forward and you put in Bradley as the center because, Rick Carlisle said it this week. He believes that he's the best rebounding center slash rebounding presence that the entire team has. And that's what it's going to take to win game 4. You have to find a way to get him more playing time. And, the Knicks changed their starting lineup. It paid off for them because the Knicks won for the first time in the playoffs this century in Indianapolis. You think about that. you don't want them to get 2 of those because you and I both know
Right.
this. If the Knicks win tomorrow in Indianapolis, I think they take the series after that because
Oh,
the
absolutely.
momentum
All the
is
momentum goes with
gone.
the Knicks. The Knicks get back their home court advantage that the Pacers stole in game 1 and 2. That would be, like I said, game 4. The importance of it cannot be understated for that very reason. But one more thing, I was going to mention it, but you already did. The Knicks changed their lineup going into game 3. More out of desperation than anything, trying to find something that would work against this Pacers team. And to your point, now it's like your move, Rick Carlisle. The ball's in your court, as corny as that sounds talking about basketball.
Yeah.
The Knicks have shown they are more than prepared to make the necessary changes. Now we just have to wait and see what the Pacers do in response. But I didn't want to spend too much time on the Pacers because we did want to keep this first episode a little bit shorter. Um, Kind of transitioning to the other professional basketball team in Indiana, Adam. Let's talk about the Fever. Their young season is underway. There's been a lot of controversy, if you want to call it. What have been your takes on the Fever so far this season?
I'll be honest. I think the signings and free agency are not panning out to this point so far. You bring in a lot of talent. The team obviously is 2-2 as it currently sits. You've had a lot of concerns with close games that they haven't been able to quite finish out. Caitlyn Clark's last game, obviously, she didn't make any 3-pointers. So I think when you're forcing, her to be, up front and center for the team, and then you don't have the backup support that you signed able to do it, you're going to run into issues. And on that note, I don't know if you've seen this today or not, but Caitlyn Clark is out for 2 weeks with that quad injury.
Yep.
So my question becomes, who steps up in order for them to win games?
Yeah, you mentioned the free agent additions. Obviously, we already have Mitchell and Boston on the team, so I do believe that there are players that can step up. But like you said, one of them's got to do it, and who's that going to be? Like you said, setting at 2-2 through 4 games, I think the excitement around Indy and Indiana as a whole coming into the season was, a little bit more optimistic than setting at 500 through 4 games. But the season is young. We'll see how they do without Clark for the first 2 weeks, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Now, I don't know about you, and I was reading some posts about it earlier. So, as of right now, obviously the team, and this is current stats, they're number 2 in offense, they're number 2 in defensive rebounds, 3 in field goal percentage, 4 in blocks, and those are obviously upper tiers. But you take away someone that scores 19 points a game from the team, and again, I know I'm going back to this and stepping up, but we're at the point where you need to have either Boston step up or Kelsey Mitchell steps up, make sure that they get the points to kind of come in and take over. But I think
Or
this
even
is a good opportunity for them to test out their bench to figure out, is there someone that can step up? And for me, I look at that Lexi Hole, Sophie Cunningham combo, and I think one of them's going to have to step up offensively in maybe a way we have not seen before.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know if you wanted to touch on it, Adam, but that opening, I think it was the first game of the season against Chicago. There was once again some controversy between Angel Reese and Caitlyn Clark. What are your thoughts on that? And I don't know if you saw the back and forth between Ryan Clark and Robert Griffin III on Twitter or not. But if you have, I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are without getting us in trouble.
Um, I'll be honest. I think it's being overly dramatized, and Angel Reese even said it. So obviously the controversy was surrounding a particular foul, which of course again, I'm going to kind of take an aggressive stance on this. So the media shows, and if we're going to get in trouble, it's going to be through the media here. I don't think so much, creating other controversies, but they showed the part of the play where obviously it was Caitlyn Clark fouling her, but that was only half of the play. I mean, Angel Reese, I think, had every right to be mad in that moment. And, I know that's a hot take, but I think the problem becomes, she fouled Boston pretty hard. I don't think people realize that. That's why Caitlyn Clark, I think, was a little bit aggressive. So I do think she shares some of the blame. But, I think there is a problem right now with how the team is being perceived. You have the media that kind of thinks of them as the bad boys. They kind of are reminiscent of like the 2004 to 2005 Detroit Pistons, but I won't dive into that because that one is more of a hot button issue for me still on controversies. But I think there is some merit to how people perceive the team. I won't say that Caitlyn Clark is a dirty player. I don't believe she is. In that moment, I think she reacted negatively. But I don't know. To me, I think the reactions are warranted. But I think if the team wants to go for that persona, that's all good for them. I do think that they have, I mean, obviously, they started last season horribly, not nearly as bad. So I'm not gonna, you know, yeah, see, I'm getting distracted and going on sidebars. I apologize. But, yeah, basically for me, I think it's being over dramatized. I think the media is making a bigger deal out of it is. The one thing I will make a stance about is the Brittany Griner comments. Have you seen that video?
Well, I haven't, but before we get to that, Adam, I just want to I'll take the bait here. I disagree with a lot of what you just said. I'm sorry if that's more controversial. I don't think Caitlin Clark fouled her that hard. I think it was one of those things where she's about to have a wide open free throw. I need to
Right.
wrap her up. I believe that Angel Reese's response was not warranted. Basically trying to charge at Caitlin Clark, which this is a conversation for another day. I do think there's hatred there, and I think it's one-sided, which is kind of what RG3 said on Twitter that got him in trouble.
Yeah.
So if I get in trouble for saying that, I apologize. But the actions I've seen in the press conferences and the way she reacts to that foul and stuff, I do think that there's a lot of hatred on Angel Reese's side. I don't know if you want to call it jealousy or what you want to call it, but I just wanted to throw that out there before you get to what you were saying. So what about Brittany Griner?
All right. So I'll get back to that in a second. But I mean, I don't disagree with you on the fact that she was over dramatic. But I think, I look like my thought process is if you look at how Caitlin Clark is going about it and, her reaction on her face, like she to me went like she was going for for vengeance. Now, obviously, I think a shout out to Aaliyah Boston because I think she saved that from being a much worse situation trying to hold back, Angel Reese. And obviously she picked up a technical for that. But, it goes back to what I said. I think there is an issue with the media over dramatizing something that I don't think is there. And you might be right. I don't think Caitlin Clark looks at it negatively. And I'll go a little deeper and just say it verbatim. I think it is one sided and it's not Caitlin Clark. And I'll let, everything stay there as it will lie. But I want to go back to the Brittany Griner comment. So there is, and I don't know if it's, I mean, how AI and things are where they change things that someone says or the video's fake. This one though, basically what I saw is she was saying that effing white girl in reference to Caitlin Clark. And I don't know if they played. I don't know if she plays for Atlanta, I believe now, for the Dream. Yeah, so we did face them this week. I was thinking Mercury. My apologies for that. But yeah, essentially, I don't know what the context around the video is. It just had that video. Now for me, that video is a problem. And I think it goes kind of back to what you were talking about with Angel Reese. Is there an issue of jealousy? Is it an issue of maybe someone getting too much attention? Now, I don't think anyone's going to disagree that Caitlyn Clark is not a good player. I don't think anyone would disagree that she's not talented, and that she might be a little aggressive. I don't think that she's overly aggressive to the point where the hatred or issues that are coming out towards her are warranted. Now, the whole thing with Brittany Griner, my jury's still out on her, and that's where my controversy is. But I don't think she has any right to throw that out there and there not be some sort of fine or for it to not be looked at. And obviously, you don't see anything that the WNBA is investigating it. So for me, quite simply, I believe that there needs to be some further looks at it. Yeah, check out that video though, Joey, for sure, because you can read her lips and it clearly looks like she's saying it. I hope it's not true, but the video to me still needs to be investigated.
All right. Well, Fever do play the Chicago Sky again coming up on June 7th, I believe. Clark will likely still be out with that injury, as they said she's going to be out for 2 weeks. But that will be right around the time she comes back. So we'll have to see if there's any more sparks between that, I'll say, one-sided rivalry, or if we can grow up and play some basketball here. But Adam, I think that's about it on my end. I didn't know if you have anything else you wanted to touch on before we wrap up here.
The only thing, and I think it's worth bringing up, going back to the Jim Irsay conversation real quick. So for people that obviously don't know, Jim Irsay's wishes are for the team to stay in Indianapolis and for his daughters to take it on. So I don't know if Carly is his oldest daughter, Carly Irsay Gordon, but she's been in team operations for, I believe it's going on 11 years now, very active since 2014, back when Jim Irsay started having, some demons come for himself. And, I've read a lot of negative comments on this, and I know there was one on Facebook that really stuck out about how the season was already over and they needed to start firing everybody. And, obviously it was like the same day that Jim Irsay died. And, I made the comment to someone, it's like, number one, like today of all days is like anything other than focusing on remembering his memory and giving condolences to me is inappropriate, simply put. But the season hasn't started. We don't know what the team's going to do. But for someone that's been around the game and has been active in operations for the team for 11 years, I think the Colts are in capable hands. Now, are we going to get a Super Bowl this year? I think you and I both know the answer to that is probably no. But I think there needs to be a grace period. And any true Colts fan is going to be understanding of that and will give it. But something just as a sidebar to add. So obviously, with, certain owners, coaches, they've always had like, a memory patch kind of put on. So I'm curious what you think goes on it. I've kind of thought JI might go on it. I've, maybe just an I mean, CEO. I don't really know. But do you think that JI is what goes on it? Do you think they try to add anything special to it? Do you think the team tries to do anything special in his memory, as the preseason starts and then as the regular season starts?
I think I saw a concept for a mid-season logo, which I don't think that's going to be the case. But I think this would look really cool as a patch or as a sticker on the helmet. But it was like a guitar, because he was big into collecting and he was a big music guy. But it was like a guitar, and somehow the letter J was worked into it, or the initials JI were worked into it. I think that's something that would fit pretty well for Jim's personality, and I think it would look pretty good on the back of a helmet or as a patch.
Do you think the team does anything? I don't know. For me, I think that obviously there's going to be something. I would almost think you might do it for the first regular season game, But with only one preseason game at home, you might try something for it too. But do you think they try to do anything on the field, like as something in his memory to start the deal or the season, or do you think that they just kind of wear the patch and that's what they do?
I'm sure at the bare minimum there will be a moment of silence. I know that'll be, a handful of months after his passing, but really, as a whole, that'll be the first large gathering of Colts fans in order to do something like that. So I could definitely see them kicking the season off that way.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, may he rest in peace. I know that this sounds maybe, and I apologize if it's insensitive to say, I think when we all faced our battles, I think there's a way that we honor people and think about them. It's like, we're glad that they're not in pain anymore. Glad that we don't have to fight those demons. So when I say may he rest in peace, I truly sincerely mean that. And I apologize again if that sounded insensitive to anybody.
No, I think that makes sense, Adam, and I echo those statements with you. But got anything else for us?
Not for today. Not for today.
All right. Well, it's good to be back, bro. I'm excited. I'm already excited to do another episode next week sometime. We'll have to have some more discussions this week. Next week I'll be down in Florida, and I'm thinking about trying to get because we'll be on the golf side. So I'm thinking about trying to get a setup with the Gulf Coast behind me or something. I think that'd be pretty cool. Speaking of background, don't mind the mess. I know you guys have seen a couple flies buzzing around. This is my garage, okay? It's loud in my house. I have this kind of cool backdrop, so I wanted to come out here and record it. I need to find a more permanent recording station, but don't judge me for my dirty garage.
Oh, don't worry. My recording station, I'm sure, will change based on the week. Some weeks with me being down at my dad's, I'll probably be doing all sorts of different backdrops for that. Other weeks, I'll probably be sitting where I am, which is my bedroom, so to speak, right now. But yeah, obviously.
Well, Adam, you said you didn't like our corny, cheesy ending from our first round of podcasts, and I still don't know how to end it. So I'm just gonna say, hope you guys come back anytime you see us pop up live, maybe even on Facebook. Jump in, interact with us. Let's talk. You guys can comment, and like Adam said, eventually we'd even like to bring some more people up in here to just talk sports. That's what me and Adam. That's what our friendship was founded on. Almost 20 years ago. We started talking about football, and now I'd say like 80% of our conversation just revolve around sports. He's an IU fan, which is unfortunate, but we can talk about that another day.
And I'm disgusted that you made me think about the fact that it has been now going on 19 years, and that 20 years just makes it sound like we're that much older. So just know that I'm not ready to call myself old just yet. But obviously, one of the things I'll end on, and if you've got anything else, go ahead. But with this particular format we're using, I'm sure you all notice it might say StreamYard or powered to StreamYard. One of the cool new features we've got is you guys can make private comments to us, or we have a chat going as well. So you can obviously, one of the things we'd like to do is answer questions live eventually. If you have private messages you want to send, questions, things you want us to discuss, bring up, those are certainly opportunities that we'll have as well. But obviously for me, there's nothing else I need to say for today, so I'm ready to sign off. Joey, anything you want to add to that?
I just want to say, Adam, if you're ready, I think this went well enough. I think next week we just do it live. What do you think?
Yeah, we can definitely try it and see how it goes.
We'll pick a day and time as it gets closer, but what do you think?
That sounds like a plan to me.
All right. Well, I hope to see you guys in here live next week commenting. If not, no hard feelings. But I want to thank you guys for listening. Adam, thank you for your time as always. I know you got to get going here, but it's been, I think, a successful first episode back, and we'll see you guys next week.
Yep. Everyone have a great week this week. We'll see you in a week.